In this video, we delve into the spine-chilling realm of terrifying tales from 2024, where each story promises to send shivers down your spine. As we explore these narratives, we invite you to immerse yourself in a world filled with suspense and intrigue, where the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary. Each tale is uniquely crafted, showcasing a blend of horror, mystery, and the unknown that captivates the imagination. From eerie encounters in desolate landscapes to unsettling experiences in seemingly safe spaces, these stories reveal the darker side of human existence and the fears that lurk just beneath the surface. Prepare yourself for an engaging journey through the macabre, as we unravel the threads of fear woven into each narrative, ensuring that you remain on the edge of your seat. With every twist and turn, these chilling accounts will not only entertain, but also provoke thought about the unseen forces that may be at play in our lives. So, gather your courage and join us as we embark on this thrilling exploration of the terrifying tales that 2024 has to offer, each one more haunting than the last. In the heart of Nebraska, where the vast plains stretch endlessly beneath a wide-open sky, stood an old farmhouse, weathered by time and the elements. Its once vibrant paint had faded to a dull hue, peeling away to reveal the bare wood beneath. Surrounding the farmhouse were dense woods, their towering trees casting long shadows that danced in the fading light of dusk. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, creating an atmosphere that felt both serene and unsettling. It was in this eerie setting that two teenagers, Jake and Sam, found themselves drawn to the allure of adventure, unaware of the chilling encounter that awaited them. As they wandered through the woods, the boys stumbled upon a clearing that revealed the remnants of a forgotten time. There, partially hidden by overgrown grass and tangled vines, lay an old well, its stone walls crumbling and covered in moss. The well seemed to beckon them closer, an invitation to uncover its secrets. Curiosity piqued, they approached cautiously, their hearts racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. It was then that they noticed a rusted chain coiled around the well's opening, its purpose long forgotten. The chain glinted ominously in the fading light, hinting at a dark history that sent shivers down their spines. As they peered into the depths of the well, a sense of dread washed over them. The darkness below seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, as if something was lurking just out of sight. Whispers of the past echoed in their minds, tales of those who had ventured too close and never returned. The air grew heavy, charged with an inexplicable tension that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, and the boys exchanged uneasy glances, their bravado waning in the face of the unknown. Suddenly, a chilling breeze swept through the clearing, carrying with it a faint, ghostly whisper that seemed to call their names. The boys felt an overwhelming urge to flee, yet they were rooted to the spot, captivated by the well's haunting presence. It was as if the very ground beneath them held secrets that were desperate to be uncovered. But at what cost? The supernatural elements of the encounter began to seep into their minds, blurring the lines between reality and the ethereal. With every heartbeat, the sense of dread deepened, and they realized that they were not alone in this forsaken place. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the woods into darkness, Jake and Sam stood at the edge of the well, their hearts pounding in their chests. The atmosphere crackled with an eerie energy, and they could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching them from the shadows. The boys knew they had stumbled upon something far more sinister than they had anticipated, and the thrill of adventure quickly morphed into a chilling realization that they had awakened forces beyond their understanding. In that moment, they understood that some secrets are best left buried, and the old well held a darkness that was not meant to be disturbed. On a warm summer day, the Johnson family packed their car for their annual trip to Minnesota, a tradition that had been passed down through generations. The excitement was palpable as the children, Emily and Jake, eagerly anticipated the familiar sights of the family farm, where their grandparents had spent countless summers. The sprawling fields of golden wheat swayed gently in the breeze, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of wildflowers. Memories of laughter, games, and the comforting embrace of family surrounded them like a warm blanket, making the journey feel like a return to a cherished home. As they arrived at the farm, The children raced towards the old barn, their laughter echoing through the fields. The farm was a place of nostalgia, where time seemed to stand still and the worries of the world faded away. However, this summer held a different air, a sense of mystery that lingered just beneath the surface. One afternoon, while exploring the outskirts of the property, Emily and Jake stumbled upon a narrow, overgrown path that led deeper into the woods. Curiosity piqued, they followed the trail, unaware of the secrets that lay ahead. After a short walk, they emerged into a clearing, and before them stood a forgotten graveyard, shrouded in an eerie silence. The headstones were weathered and cracked, some barely legible, their inscriptions worn away by time. A sense of unease settled over the children as they wandered among the graves, each one telling a story of lives once lived. It was here that they discovered the tragic history of the graveyard, a family that had once thrived in the area, only to be struck by a series of devastating events that led to their untimely demise. The children felt a chill run down their spines as they read the names etched into the stones, realizing that they were standing in the presence of a sorrowful past. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the graveyard, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy, and an unsettling feeling crept in, as if the spirits of the departed were watching them. Emily and Jake exchanged nervous glances, their earlier excitement replaced by a sense of foreboding. They decided to return to the safety of the farmhouse, but as they turned to leave, they heard a faint whisper carried by the wind, a soft, sorrowful sound that seemed to call out to them. The children hesitated, their hearts racing, but the pull of the graveyard was too strong to resist. That night, as the family gathered around the dinner table, the children shared their discovery with their parents. Their mother listened intently, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she recounted the stories she had heard as a child about the graveyard and the tragic fate of the family buried there. The tales spoke of restless spirits, of children who had never found peace, and of eerie occurrences that had plagued the area for generations. The atmosphere in the farmhouse grew tense, and the children felt a chill that had nothing to do with the summer night. Later that evening, as the family settled in for the night, strange occurrences began to unfold. The sound of soft footsteps echoed in the hallway, and the flickering of lights cast dancing shadows on the walls. Emily and Jake lay in their beds, wide awake, their imaginations running wild with the stories they had heard. They could have sworn they felt a presence in the room, a weight in the air that made it difficult to breathe. The whispers from the graveyard seemed to linger, weaving through their thoughts and filling them with an inexplicable dread. Determined to uncover the truth, the children decided to return to the graveyard the following day. Armed with flashlights and a sense of bravery, they ventured back into the woods, the memories of their family's summer trips now overshadowed by the haunting experience that awaited them. As they approached the graveyard, the atmosphere felt charged, as if the very ground beneath their feet was alive with energy. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a ghostly chorus, urging them to listen, to understand the sorrow that had been left behind. As they explored further, they stumbled upon a small, unmarked grave, overgrown with weeds. The air grew colder, and a sense of urgency filled the space. They knelt beside the grave, feeling an overwhelming sadness wash over them. In that moment, they understood that the spirits of the children buried there were reaching out, longing to be remembered, to have their stories told. The eerie events of the previous night suddenly made sense. The whispers were not meant to frighten them, but to connect them to a past that had been forgotten. With newfound determination, Emily and Jake vowed to honor the memory of the children and share their story with their family. As they left the graveyard, the weight of the past felt lighter, and the whispers faded into the gentle rustle of the leaves. The haunting experience had transformed their summer trip into something profound, a reminder of the importance of remembering those who came before them. The Johnson family returned to the farmhouse, forever changed by their encounter with the forgotten graveyard, carrying with them the echoes of a tragic history that would not be silenced. In the dense, humid woods of Mississippi, where the air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, a growing problem plagued the local farmers: wild hogs. These feral beasts, with their sharp tusks and insatiable appetites, wreaked havoc on crops and pastures, leaving destruction in their wake. The state had become a battleground for hunters determined to control the hog population, and among them was a seasoned hunter named Tom. With years of experience under his belt, Tom was well-versed in the art of tracking and trapping these elusive creatures. Armed with his trusty rifle and a pack of trained dogs, he ventured into the heart of the woods, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As twilight descended, casting long shadows through the trees, Tom set up his camp near a known hog wallow. The sounds of the forest enveloped him, the rustling of leaves, the distant croak of frogs, and the occasional hoot of an owl. He felt at home in this wild landscape, where the thrill of the hunt coursed through his veins. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the surroundings, and Tom couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. He dismissed the thought, attributing it to the natural unease that came with hunting in the dark. Hours passed, and as the night deepened, Tom's dogs began to stir, their instincts kicking in. Suddenly, a cacophony of barking erupted, echoing through the woods. Tom's heart raced as he grabbed his rifle, knowing that the dogs had picked up the scent of hogs. He followed the sound, adrenaline pumping through his veins, until he reached a clearing where the moonlight illuminated the scene. What he saw next would haunt him for the rest of his days. In the center of the clearing, a massive figure loomed, its silhouette grotesque and unnatural. Tom squinted, trying to make sense of what he was witnessing. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. Part man, part beast, with matted fur and elongated limbs. Its eyes glowed with a feral intensity, reflecting the moonlight like twin lanterns in the darkness. The dogs, usually fierce and fearless, cowered at the edge of the clearing, their barks turning into whimpers of fear. Tom's breath caught in his throat as he realized he was not alone in the woods. He had stumbled upon a werewolf. The creature lunged forward with a speed that defied belief, its powerful jaws snapping shut around a wild hog that had wandered too close. Tom stood frozen, a mix of fear and disbelief coursing through him. The sight was both horrifying and mesmerizing. The sheer brutality of the attack, the primal instinct of the beast, left him paralyzed. He had come to hunt hogs, but now he was witnessing a nightmare unfold before his eyes. The werewolf tore into the hog with a ferocity that sent blood spraying into the air, painting the ground in a gruesome display of nature's raw power. In that moment, Tom's instincts kicked in, and he fought against the paralysis that gripped him. He raised his rifle, hands trembling, but doubt flooded his mind. Could he really shoot this creature? Was it even real? The stories he had heard around the campfire, tales of werewolves and other supernatural beings, suddenly felt all too real. The fear that had been a distant whisper now roared in his ears, drowning out all rational thought. He hesitated, caught between the urge to flee and the instinct to protect himself. As the werewolf finished its gruesome meal, it lifted its head, blood dripping from its jaws, and locked eyes with Tom. A chill ran down his spine as he felt the weight of its gaze, a predatory stare that seemed to pierce through him. In that instant, Tom understood the true nature of the creature before him. It was not just a beast. It was a hunter, and he was its prey. The realization sent a jolt of terror through him, and he finally found his legs, turning to run back into the safety of the trees. The sound of the werewolf's growl echoed behind him, a low, rumbling sound that reverberated through the night. Tom sprinted through the underbrush, branches clawing at his skin as he pushed himself to move faster. His heart raced, pounding in his chest like a war drum, drowning out the sounds of the forest. He could hear the creature pursuing him, its heavy footsteps crashing through the foliage, growing closer with each passing second. The fear was overwhelming, a primal instinct to survive that propelled him forward. As he burst through the tree line and into the open field, Tom glanced back, half expecting to see the werewolf closing in on him. But the creature had vanished into the shadows, leaving only the echoes of its growls behind. He stumbled to a halt, gasping for breath, his mind racing with disbelief. Had it really happened? Was he losing his grip on reality? The adrenaline coursing through his veins began to fade, replaced by a chilling sense of vulnerability. Tom made his way back to his camp, every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs sending his heart racing anew. He couldn't shake the image of the werewolf from his mind, the sheer power, the primal instinct, the horror of what he had witnessed. As he packed up his gear, he knew he could never return to those woods, not after what he had seen. The hog problem that had once seemed so straightforward now felt trivial in the face of the supernatural terror that lurked in the shadows. That night, as he drove away from the farm, Tom glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the glowing eyes of the werewolf watching him from the darkness. The fear and disbelief of his encounter would stay with him forever, a chilling reminder that some legends are rooted in truth, and that the wilds of Mississippi held secrets far beyond the realm of ordinary hunting. In the heart of a sprawling naval base, where the scent of saltwater mingled with the metallic tang of machinery, a young Naval Reserve member named Alex found himself navigating the complexities of military life. Having joined the reserves to serve his country while pursuing his civilian career, Alex was proud of his commitment but often felt the weight of the duality of his existence. By day, he was a dedicated technician, ensuring that the ships were in peak condition. By night, he donned his uniform for patrols, a duty that filled him with a sense of purpose and camaraderie. However, the nights were not always as straightforward as they seemed. The naval base was a labyrinth of concrete and steel, with towering ships docked at the pier and the constant hum of activity echoing through the air. Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness enveloped the base, an unsettling stillness settled in. It was during these night patrols that Alex began to experience something he could not explain. The first encounter occurred on a particularly quiet evening, the kind where the only sounds were the distant lapping of waves against the hulls of the ships and the occasional call of a seabird. As he walked the perimeter, flashlight in hand, he felt an inexplicable sense of being watched. At first, he dismissed it as paranoia, a natural response to the isolation of the night. But as the days turned into weeks, the feeling intensified. It was during one of these patrols that he first caught sight of the tall man. Standing at the edge of the shadows, the figure was unnaturally tall, almost impossibly so, with a silhouette that seemed to blend into the darkness. Alex's heart raced as he squinted into the night, trying to discern whether it was a trick of the light or something more sinister. The figure remained motionless, watching him with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. As the nights wore on, the encounters became more frequent. Each time Alex patrolled the same stretch of the base, he would catch glimpses of the tall man lurking just beyond the reach of his flashlight. The figure never moved closer, yet its presence was suffocating, a constant reminder that something was amiss. The other members of his unit brushed off his concerns, attributing them to the stress of military life and the isolation of night duty. But Alex knew what he had seen, and the fear began to gnaw at him, creeping into his thoughts during the day and invading his dreams at night. The psychological impact of these encounters began to take a toll on Alex. He found himself growing increasingly anxious, his heart racing at the slightest sound. The once comforting routine of his patrols became a source of dread. He would often replay the moments in his mind, trying to rationalize what he had experienced. Was it a figment of his imagination, a manifestation of the stress he was under, or was there truly something lurking in the shadows, watching him with malevolent intent? As the weeks turned into months, Alex's mental state deteriorated. He became withdrawn, isolating himself from his fellow reservists, who were oblivious to the turmoil brewing within him. The tall man haunted his thoughts, a specter that refused to be exorcised. He began to question his own sanity, wondering if he was fit for duty or if he was merely a liability to his unit. The once proud Naval Reserve member now felt like a shell of his former self, plagued by fear and uncertainty. One fateful night, during a particularly tense patrol, Alex encountered the tall man once more. This time, the figure stepped into the light, revealing a face that was both familiar and foreign. It was as if he were looking at a distorted reflection of himself, a twisted version of the person he used to be. The sight sent him reeling, and he stumbled backward, heart pounding in his chest. The tall man raised a hand, and for a moment, Alex felt an overwhelming urge to approach, to understand the entity that had haunted him for so long. But the instinct to flee overpowered him, and he turned, sprinting back toward the safety of the base. The experience left him shaken to his core. He could no longer distinguish between reality and the nightmares that plagued him. The tall man had become a symbol of his fears, a manifestation of the darkness that lurked not only in the shadows of the naval base, but also within himself. Alex knew he needed help, but the stigma surrounding mental health in the military held him back. He feared being seen as weak, as someone unfit for service. The internal struggle raged on, a battle between pride and the desperate need for support. Finally, after a particularly harrowing night, Alex reached a breaking point. He confided in a trusted sergeant, sharing the unsettling experiences that had haunted him for so long. To his surprise, the sergeant listened without judgment, offering understanding and support. It was a turning point for Alex, a moment of clarity that allowed him to confront his fears head-on. With the sergeant's encouragement, he sought counseling, beginning the long journey toward healing. Through therapy, Alex learned to confront the psychological impact of his experiences. He discovered that the tall man was not just a figure lurking in the shadows, but a representation of his own fears and insecurities. The process was not easy, but with each session he began to reclaim his sense of self. The encounters that had once filled him with dread transformed into a catalyst for growth, pushing him to confront the darkness within and emerge stronger. As he continued his service in the Naval Reserves, Alex found a renewed sense of purpose. The tall man no longer haunted his thoughts. Instead, he became a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. The experience had changed him, but it had also taught him the importance of seeking help and supporting one another in the face of adversity. The naval base, once a place of fear, became a symbol of strength and camaraderie, a testament to the power of confronting one's demons and emerging victorious. In the heart of a dense forest, shrouded in a thick blanket of fog, stood a remote lodge that had been chosen for the annual corporate retreat of a mid-sized tech company. The lodge, with its rustic charm and towering wooden beams, seemed like the perfect escape from the hustle and bustle of city life. However, as the employees arrived, a sense of unease settled over the group, as if the very air was charged with an unspoken tension. The fog hung low, curling around the trees like ghostly fingers, obscuring the path ahead and creating an atmosphere thick with mystery. As the team settled in, the initial excitement of team-building activities and brainstorming sessions quickly gave way to an unsettling feeling that something was amiss. The lodge, while cozy, had an eerie quality. The creaking floorboards and the distant howling of the wind outside seemed to whisper secrets of the past. The employees, eager to bond and collaborate, found themselves glancing nervously at one another, the fog outside mirroring the uncertainty that loomed within the group. On the second day of the retreat, a few adventurous souls decided to explore the surrounding area, hoping to shake off the strange feeling that had settled over them. As they wandered deeper into the woods, they stumbled upon a forgotten graveyard, hidden behind a thicket of trees. The sight was jarring. The headstones were weathered and cracked, some barely legible, their inscriptions worn away by time. A chill ran down their spines as they realized they had uncovered a piece of history long buried, a resting place for souls that had been forgotten. The group hesitated at the entrance, an unspoken agreement passing between them that this was not a place to linger. Yet, curiosity got the better of them, and they ventured further into the graveyard, their laughter fading into an uneasy silence. As they walked among the graves, they began to feel an inexplicable sense of being watched, as if the spirits of the departed were observing their every move. The atmosphere grew heavy, and the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping around them like a shroud. That night, as the employees gathered around the fireplace in the lodge, the mood shifted. Stories of the graveyard circulated, each tale more unsettling than the last. Whispers of strange occurrences and ghostly apparitions filled the air, and the flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, amplifying the tension in the room. The laughter that had once echoed through the lodge was replaced by nervous glances and hushed voices, as the employees began to question whether they had disturbed something that should have remained undisturbed. As the night wore on, the unsettling events began to unfold. One by one, the employees reported strange occurrences. Doors creaking open on their own, cold drafts sweeping through the lodge despite the lack of wind, and the feeling of a presence lingering just out of sight. The atmosphere grew thick with psychological tension, as fear and paranoia seeped into their minds. They began to wonder if the graveyard had awakened something, a supernatural force that was now toying with them. The following day, the group decided to confront their fears head-on. They returned to the graveyard, determined to uncover the truth behind the unsettling occurrences. As they stood among the graves, they felt a palpable energy in the air, a mix of dread and curiosity. The fog swirled around them, obscuring their vision and creating an otherworldly atmosphere. It was then that they noticed something strange. One of the headstones had been disturbed, the earth around it freshly turned as if someone or something had recently been there. Panic set in as they realized they were not alone. The feeling of being watched intensified, and the whispers of the past seemed to echo in their minds. The group huddled together, their hearts racing as they tried to make sense of the situation. The psychological tension reached a breaking point, and they began to argue, each person blaming the others for their predicament. The once cohesive team was now fractured, fear driving a wedge between them. As night fell once more, the lodge became a prison of their own making. The employees were unable to shake the feeling of dread that hung in the air. Shadows danced along the walls, and the wind howled outside, creating an unsettling symphony that played on their nerves. They gathered in the common room, seeking comfort in numbers, but the atmosphere was thick with unspoken fears. The supernatural elements that had begun to manifest were no longer just figments of their imagination. They were real, and they were closing in. In the dead of night, the power flickered and went out, plunging the lodge into darkness. Panic erupted as the employees scrambled for their flashlights, their hearts pounding in their chests. The fog outside pressed against the windows, and the howling wind seemed to carry with it the voices of the long-forgotten souls from the graveyard. The group huddled together, their breaths coming in quick gasps as they tried to calm one another. But the fear was palpable, a living entity that wrapped around them like a vice. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the lodge, sending everyone into a frenzy. They rushed to the source of the noise, only to find a window shattered, the glass scattered across the floor. The air was thick with tension as they realized that something had breached their sanctuary. The psychological impact of the events began to weigh heavily on them, and they could feel the grip of fear tightening around their throats. In the midst of the chaos, one employee, Sarah, began to speak of a legend she had heard about the graveyard, a tale of restless spirits seeking vengeance for their forgotten lives. Her voice trembled as she recounted the story, and the others listened in rapt attention, their fear morphing into a collective anxiety. The supernatural elements that had once seemed distant now felt all too real, and the group began to question whether they had unwittingly awakened something that should have remained undisturbed. As the night dragged on, the unsettling occurrences escalated. Shadows flitted past the windows, and the sound of whispers filled the air, growing louder and more insistent. The employees could no longer deny the reality of their situation. They were trapped in a nightmare of their own making. The psychological tension reached a fever pitch, and the group began to fracture further, with accusations flying and trust eroding. In a desperate attempt to escape the suffocating atmosphere, they decided to leave the lodge and return to the graveyard, hoping to appease the spirits they had disturbed. Armed with flashlights and a sense of dread, they made their way through the fog, the weight of their fear palpable in the air. As they approached the graveyard, the atmosphere shifted once more, the fog swirling around them like a living entity. Standing among the graves, they felt the energy of the place shift, a palpable tension that hung in the air. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows seemed to dance around them, taunting them with their presence. It was then that they realized the truth. They had not just disturbed the graveyard. They had awakened something ancient and powerful, a force that thrived on their fear and despair. As the night wore on, the group faced their darkest fears, each person grappling with the psychological impact of their experiences. The supernatural elements that had once seemed like mere stories now felt like a reality they could not escape. The fog enveloped them, and the whispers of the forgotten souls echoed in their minds, a haunting reminder of the consequences of their actions. In the end, the corporate retreat became a turning point for the employees, a shared experience that would forever bond them in the face of the unknown. The strange occurrences, the unsettling encounters, and the psychological tension they had faced together would linger in their memories, a testament to the power of fear and the mysteries that lay hidden in the shadows. As they left the lodge behind, they carried with them the weight of their experiences, forever changed by the haunting events that had unfolded in the fog-shrouded woods. In a quaint town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there lived a dedicated caregiver named Clara. With a heart full of compassion and a deep-seated desire to help others, she had spent years working with the elderly, providing companionship and support to those in need. Clara had always felt a calling to this line of work, drawn to the stories and wisdom that came with age. Her latest assignment brought her to the home of Mr. Thompson, an elderly man whose health had been in decline for several years. He was a man of few words, his once vibrant spirit dimmed by the weight of loneliness and illness. Mr. Thompson lived alone in a charming but aging Victorian house, filled with relics of a bygone era. The walls were adorned with photographs of family members long gone, and the air was thick with the scent of old books and memories. Clara quickly learned that Mr. Thompson had a deep love for art, particularly paintings that depicted animals. However, there was one painting in particular that seemed to cast a shadow over the house. A large, imposing portrait of a wolfhound that hung in the dimly lit living room. The wolfhound painting was striking, capturing the majestic beauty of the breed with an unsettling intensity. The dog's eyes seemed to follow Clara as she moved about the room, a piercing gaze that sent shivers down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about the painting, an energy that felt both captivating and foreboding. Mr. Thompson rarely spoke of it, but Clara sensed that it held a significant place in his heart, despite the unease it inspired. One rainy afternoon, while dusting the shelves, Clara stumbled upon an old journal tucked away behind a stack of books. Intrigued, she opened it to find entries detailing the history of the wolfhound painting. The journal belonged to Mr. Thompson's late wife, who had been an avid art collector. As Clara read through the pages, she discovered that the painting had a dark and unsettling history. It was said to be cursed, a tale woven into the fabric of the town's folklore. According to the journal, the painting had been created by a renowned artist who had mysteriously vanished shortly after its completion. Rumors circulated that the artist had poured his soul into the painting, imbuing it with a supernatural essence. Those who owned the painting reported strange occurrences, unexplained shadows, eerie howls echoing through the night, and a sense of impending doom that seemed to linger in the air. Clara's heart raced as she read the accounts of previous owners, each one more chilling than the last. As the days turned into weeks, Clara found herself increasingly drawn to the painting, despite the unsettling feelings it evoked. She began to notice peculiar changes in Mr. Thompson's behavior. He would often sit in front of the painting for hours, lost in thought, his expression a mix of sorrow and longing. Clara felt a growing concern for his well-being, sensing that the painting was affecting him in ways she couldn't fully understand. It was as if the wolfhound had become a conduit for his emotions, amplifying his fears and regrets. One evening, as a storm raged outside, Clara decided to confront Mr. Thompson about the painting. She gently broached the subject, asking him about its history and the stories he had heard. To her surprise, he opened up, revealing a deep connection to the artwork. He spoke of his wife's passion for art and how the painting had been a centerpiece in their home for decades. But as he recounted the tales of its curse, Clara could see the shadows of fear flickering in his eyes. "It's not just a painting," he said, his voice trembling. "It's a reminder of everything I've lost." The wolfhound was a symbol of loyalty and companionship, but it also carries the weight of sorrow. "I fear it holds the spirits of those who have passed, and I can feel their presence every time I look at it." Clara's heart ached for him. She understood the psychological implications of grief and loss, but the supernatural elements of the painting began to weigh heavily on her mind. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that the wolfhound was watching her, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The howling wind outside seemed to echo the cries of lost souls, and she found herself questioning the very fabric of reality. As the days progressed, Clara began to experience unsettling occurrences of her own. Shadows danced along the walls, and she would often hear faint whispers in the dead of night. The atmosphere in the house grew thick with tension, and she could feel the weight of the painting pressing down on her. It was as if the curse had seeped into the very walls, intertwining with the memories of the past. One fateful evening, Clara decided to investigate the origins of the painting further. She visited the local library, poring over old newspapers and records in search of answers. What she uncovered sent chills down her spine. The artist who had created the painting had been rumored to have dabbled in the occult, seeking to capture the essence of life and death within his work. The more Clara learned, the more she felt the pull of the painting, as if it were calling to her, urging her to uncover its secrets. Returning to the lodge, Clara found Mr. Thompson sitting in front of the painting, his expression distant and hollow. She approached him, her heart heavy with concern. "Mr. Thompson, we need to talk about the painting. I think it's affecting you more than you realize." He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "I know, Clara. I can feel it too. It's as if the painting is alive, feeding off my memories and regrets. I've seen things, visions of the past, of my wife, of the wolfhound we once had. It's beautiful and terrifying all at once." Clara's heart raced as she listened to him. The psychological implications of the painting were becoming clearer. It was a mirror reflecting their deepest fears and sorrows. But the supernatural elements were undeniable, and Clara felt a growing urgency to break the cycle of despair that surrounded them. Determined to confront the curse, Clara proposed a plan. "We need to cleanse the painting, to release whatever holds it captive. We can't let it control us any longer." Mr. Thompson hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes, but he ultimately agreed, recognizing the toll the painting had taken on his life. That night they gathered supplies, candles, sage, and a small bowl of salt. Clara felt a sense of purpose as they prepared to confront the darkness that had seeped into their lives. They lit the candles, their flickering flames casting shadows on the walls, and began the ritual to cleanse the painting. As they chanted the words of the incantation, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The air grew thick with energy, and Clara could feel the weight of the painting pressing down on them. The wolfhound's eyes seemed to glow with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. Panic surged through Clara as she fumbled for her flashlight, illuminating the painting. To her horror, she saw the wolfhound's expression change, its mouth curling into a snarl, as if it were alive and aware of their presence. The whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind, drowning out her thoughts. She could feel the psychological tension reaching a breaking point, the supernatural elements converging into a storm of chaos. "Clara!" Mr. Thompson shouted, his voice filled with desperation. "We need to stop." But it was too late. The painting pulsed with energy, and Clara felt herself being drawn toward it, as if the wolfhound were calling her name. She fought against the pull, but the weight of her own fears and regrets threatened to consume her. In that moment, she realized that the curse was not just about the painting. It was about the darkness that resided within them both. With a surge of determination, Clara broke free from the painting's grasp and grabbed the bowl of salt, flinging it toward the canvas. "No more!" she cried, her voice echoing through the room. The salt struck the painting, and a blinding light erupted from the wolfhound, illuminating the darkness that had enveloped them. As the light faded, Clara found herself back in the living room, the painting now silent and still. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and she could feel the weight of the curse dissipating. Mr. Thompson sat beside her, his expression a mix of relief and disbelief. "We did it," he whispered, tears glistening in his eyes. "We broke the curse." In the days that followed, Clara and Mr. Thompson began to heal. The painting, once a source of fear, became a reminder of their strength and resilience. They shared stories of the past, honoring the memories of loved ones lost while embracing the present. The psychological implications of their experience transformed into a bond that brought them closer together, a testament to the power of confronting one's fears. As Clara continued her work as a caregiver, she carried the lessons learned from the cursed painting with her. The experience had changed her, deepening her understanding of the complexities of grief and the supernatural. The wolfhound painting, once a haunting presence, became a symbol of hope and healing, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a path toward light. On a warm summer afternoon, the sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the tranquil river that wound its way through the countryside. The gentle sound of water lapping against the shore created a soothing melody, while the rustling leaves whispered secrets to the wind. It was the perfect day for fishing, and young Tommy was thrilled to be spending it with his father, who had promised him a day filled with adventure and bonding. Tommy, a bright-eyed boy of 8, had always looked up to his father, who was a patient teacher and a skilled angler. They arrived at their favorite fishing spot, a secluded area where the river widened and the trees formed a natural canopy overhead. The air was thick with the scent of fresh earth and blooming wildflowers, and the world felt alive with possibility. As they set up their gear, Tommy's excitement bubbled over, and he could hardly contain his eagerness to catch the biggest fish. After casting their lines into the water, they settled onto the grassy bank, sharing stories and laughter as they waited for a bite. Tommy's father taught him about the different types of fish that inhabited the river, and the boy listened intently, his imagination painting vivid pictures of the underwater world. Time seemed to slip away as they enjoyed each other's company, the bond between them growing stronger with every shared moment. However, as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the water, an unsettling feeling crept into the air. Tommy noticed a figure standing on the opposite bank, partially obscured by the trees. The man was tall and thin, dressed in a long dark coat that seemed to absorb the light around him. Tommy squinted, trying to make out the man's features, but something was off. He had no face. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth, featureless surface, like a blank canvas. "Dad, look!" Tommy exclaimed, pointing toward the figure. His father turned, but when he looked back, the man was gone, as if he had melted into the shadows. Tommy felt a chill run down his spine, but he brushed it off, attributing it to his imagination. After all, he was just a child, and the world was full of wonders and mysteries. As the afternoon wore on, the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The river sparkled like 1,000 diamonds, and the peaceful ambience seemed to wrap around them like a warm blanket. But Tommy couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his stomach. He glanced back toward the spot where he had seen the faceless man, but there was nothing there, just the gentle flow of the river and the rustling of leaves. "Tommy, are you okay?" his father asked, noticing the boy's distracted demeanor. "You seem a bit off." "I saw a man over there," Tommy replied, pointing again, but this time he felt foolish. He didn't have a face. His father chuckled, ruffling Tommy's hair. "You're just seeing things, buddy. It's probably just a trick of the light. Let's focus on catching some fish. Okay?" Tommy nodded, but the encounter lingered in his mind, gnawing at his thoughts. He tried to push it aside, but the image of the faceless man haunted him, a shadow lurking at the edges of his consciousness. As they continued to fish, the atmosphere shifted, the air growing heavier, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Just as they were about to pack up for the day, Tommy felt an inexplicable urge to look back at the riverbank. To his horror, he saw the faceless man standing there once more, closer this time, his presence more palpable. The man seemed to be watching him, and Tommy's heart raced as fear gripped him. He turned to his father, but when he looked back, the man was gone again. "Dad, I really saw him this time," Tommy insisted, his voice trembling. "He was right there." His father frowned, concern etched on his face. "Tommy, I think it's time we head home. You're just tired, and it's getting late. Reluctantly, Tommy agreed, but as they packed up their gear, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The river, once a place of joy and adventure, now felt like a dark, foreboding entity. The faceless man had invaded his thoughts, and the innocence of the day had been tainted by an unsettling presence. As they walked back to the car, Tommy glanced over his shoulder one last time, half expecting to see the man standing there, waiting for him. But the river was empty, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Yet the feeling of being watched lingered, a shadow that followed him home. That night, as Tommy lay in bed, he replayed the events of the day in his mind. The faceless man had become an obsession, a puzzle he couldn't solve. He tried to convince himself that it was just a figment of his imagination, a trick of the light, but deep down, he knew that something more sinister was at play. The encounter had shifted his perception of reality, leaving him questioning what was real and what was merely a product of his mind. Sleep eluded him as he tossed and turned, the darkness of his room amplifying his fears. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind outside, sent his heart racing. He could almost feel the faceless man lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. The innocence of childhood had been shattered, replaced by a sense of dread that clung to him like a second skin. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of the encounter haunted Tommy. He became withdrawn, avoiding the river and the fishing trips he had once loved. His father noticed the change in him, but Tommy struggled to articulate the fear that had taken root in his heart. The faceless man had become a symbol of his anxiety, a manifestation of the unknown that loomed over him. At school, Tommy found it difficult to concentrate. The other children laughed and played, but he felt like an outsider, trapped in a world that no longer made sense. The faceless man had blurred the lines between reality and imagination, and he couldn't escape the feeling that something was watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. One day, during recess, Tommy sat alone on a swing, lost in thought. His best friend, Jake, approached him, concern etched on his face. "Hey, Tommy, what's wrong? You've been acting weird lately." Tommy hesitated, unsure of how to explain the darkness that had settled over him. "I saw something by the river," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "A man without a face." Jake's eyes widened, and he leaned closer. "That sounds scary, but it was probably just your imagination, right?" Tommy nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. "I don't know. Felt real. I can't stop thinking about it." As the days passed, Tommy's fear began to manifest in other ways. He became increasingly anxious, jumping at the slightest sound and struggling to sleep at night. The faceless man had invaded his dreams, appearing in the shadows, his presence suffocating. Tommy felt trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape the grip of fear that had taken hold of him. One evening, after a particularly restless night, Tommy decided he needed to confront his fears. He gathered his courage and approached his father, who was sitting in the living room, reading a book. "Dad, can we go back to the river?" he asked, his voice trembling. His father looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Are you sure, Tommy? I thought you didn't want to go back there." "I need to face it," Tommy replied, determination shining through his fear. "I need to know if it was real." After a moment of contemplation, his father nodded. "All right, let's go. But we'll be careful, okay?" As they drove to the river, Tommy's heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the landscape. When they arrived, the river was calm, the water reflecting the colors of the sky. But the sense of foreboding hung in the air, a reminder of the encounter that had changed everything. They walked to the spot where they had fished before, and Tommy felt a shiver run down his spine. The memories flooded back, and he could almost feel the faceless man lurking just beyond the trees. "Dad, what if he's still here?" Tommy whispered, his voice trembling. His father placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll face it together, Tommy. You're not alone." As they stood by the river, Tommy took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage he had. "I'm not afraid of you," he called out, his voice echoing across the water. "Show yourself." For a moment, there was silence, the only sound the gentle lapping of the river against the shore. Tommy's heart raced as he scanned the trees, half expecting the faceless man to emerge from the shadows. But nothing happened. The air was still, and the world felt eerily calm. Just as Tommy began to doubt himself, he caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye. He turned, and there, standing at the edge of the trees, was the faceless man. His heart dropped, and fear surged through him, but he stood his ground, refusing to back down. "Why are you here?" Tommy shouted, his voice trembling but resolute. "What do you want?" The faceless man remained silent, his presence heavy and oppressive. Tommy felt a wave of fear wash over him, but he forced himself to hold his ground. He realized that the man was not just a figure of his imagination. He was a representation of the fears that had taken root in Tommy's mind. In that moment, something shifted within Tommy. He understood that the faceless man was a manifestation of his anxiety, a reflection of the darkness that had clouded his perception of reality. The encounter had been terrifying, but it had also been a catalyst for growth. He could choose to confront his fears rather than let them control him. With newfound determination, Tommy took a step forward. "You don't scare me anymore," he declared, his voice strong and unwavering. "I'm not afraid of you." The faceless man seemed to waver, the shadows around him flickering like candlelight. Tommy felt a surge of power as he faced the figure, the weight of fear lifting from his shoulders. The man's presence began to dissolve, the darkness retreating into the trees. As the faceless man faded away, Tommy felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had confronted his fears and emerged victorious. The river, once a place of dread, now felt like a sanctuary, a reminder of his strength and resilience. When they returned home that evening, Tommy felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from his heart. The encounter had changed him, reshaping his perception of reality. He understood that fear was a natural part of life, but it didn't have to define him. He could face the unknown with courage and strength, and in doing so, he had reclaimed his sense of self. In the days that followed, Tommy found joy in fishing once more, the river becoming a place of adventure and discovery. The faceless man had become a distant memory, a reminder of the power of confronting one's fears. As he cast his line into the water, he felt a sense of peace wash over him, knowing that he had faced the darkness and emerged stronger on the other side. In this video, we journeyed through a series of spine-chilling tales that delve into the realm of the supernatural, each story leaving an indelible mark on our understanding of fear and the unknown. The first tale introduced us to a haunted house, where the echoes of the past reverberated through its walls, reminding us that some places carry the weight of their history. The key takeaway here is that the past can linger in ways we might not fully comprehend, urging us to consider the stories that haunt our surroundings. Next, we explored the unsettling experience of a child who encountered a faceless man by the river. This story highlighted the psychological implications of fear and how our imaginations can conjure figures that embody our deepest anxieties. It serves as a reminder to reflect on the fears we carry and how they shape our perception of reality. The supernatural elements in this tale encourage us to confront our fears rather than let them control us. We then moved on to the eerie encounter of a caregiver with a cursed painting, which revealed the profound connection between art and the emotions it can evoke. The painting, imbued with a dark history, acted as a mirror reflecting the character's grief and regrets. This tale emphasizes the idea that art can hold power beyond our understanding, inviting us to ponder the stories behind the creations we encounter in our lives. As we wrapped up the video, we encouraged viewers to reflect on the supernatural elements presented in each story. What do these tales reveal about our fears, our pasts, and the mysteries that surround us? We invite you to consider how these narratives resonate with your own experiences and beliefs about the unknown. If you enjoyed these chilling tales and want to explore more spine-tingling content, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with friends who appreciate a good scare. Your support helps us continue to bring you the most haunting stories and supernatural explorations. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the eerie and the unknown, and we look forward to sharing more terrifying tales with you in the future.